Good morning. I'm happy to be here with you today, as always. So today I'm going to teach you a subtle trick that I didn't even know I used until someone brought it to my attention after an event. He came up to me and said, I know what you're doing. You're using this technique. And I said, actually, yeah, I am. And the technique, the tip is the power of the pause. Yes, sometimes not saying a word is the best way to be heard. Now, here are 3 ways you can use a gap of silence to your advantage when telling your story. First, use a pause to get their attention at the very beginning. After you've been introduced or when it's your turn to speak in a meeting and you plan to start with a story, sometimes getting into the story is really the most awkward part. Have you experienced that? Even I'll admit it. It's tough to transition from the first few words or into the first few words of the story you want to tell. So instead, just pause. Take a breath. And then start the story. A little pause goes a long way in this situation. It will draw listeners in because we're not used to pauses, and it will indicate that something different is about to happen. So pause before you start the story to naturally set the story apart from the rest of the meeting or presentation. All right? Second, use a pause to shift the mood within a story. Let's say you're going along telling the first part of the story. There's some humor, some details. They're getting to know the characters in the story a little bit, and suddenly things change. The explosion, as I call it, happens. And maybe the explosion is not good, right? So to move from the normal, as you have often heard me discuss it, to the unpleasant turn of events, use the pause to shift the mood. Stop, take a breath, and give the audience a moment to realize that something's about to change. And then continue. A pause is the perfect way to prep your listeners for the turn the story is about to take. Third and finally, pause if you don't know what to say next, all right? There are those moments when we get lost. We forget what comes next. And in these situations, many people just keep talking. They try to talk their way out of it. They fumble around, they talk in circles, they try to say their way out of the problem when in fact, it just makes the problem worse. If ever you get stuck or lose your train of thought, pause instead. Take a breath. Let your brain catch up to your words. And it may seem like an hour of silence to you, but I guarantee it only takes a few seconds of silence to reset and get yourself back on track. Meanwhile, your listeners won't be the wiser to it. They'll simply think you're adding suspense versus rambling, all right? So the next time you plan to share a story, remember, sometimes the most powerful moments are those where you don't actually make a sound. Expert advice. Use the power of the pause. Now, I hope this little insider information makes a difference for you, makes things a little bit easier when you go to tell your stories. And if you know someone who might benefit from this tip, please pass this video along. That's all for now. Always a pleasure to be here with you. Remember, you're just one story from greatness, and I'll be back to talk to you more about it soon.